Millionaire heard laughter upstairs and froze when he saw his maid dancing with his disabled daughter. Lucas West sat at the head of the long marble conference table, his fingers steepled under his chin as 3 department heads presented quarterly figures. The numbers weren't strong, the charts were clean, but his mind was not there. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows displayed the city skyline, immaculate and sterile, just like everything Lucas had built. Then came a sound that made the blood freeze in his veins. Laughter, high-pitched, joyful, familiar. A second later, the faint strain of music followed, soft piano notes drifting downward from the second floor. Lucas blinked, stared high at the ceiling. The meeting continued around him, unaware. Another laugh rang out clear and unbroken. Emily. He stood so suddenly that the chair scraped loudly against the marble. Mr. West? One executive asked, puzzled. Lucas did not respond. He whistled ready. Walking fast. His polished shoes echoed through the hallway as he strode toward the grand staircase. He climbed 2 steps at a time, heart pounding, the music and laughter growing louder. It had been over 2 years since he had heard that sound from his daughter, 2 years since the accident. 2 years since the doctors had said she would never walk again. Lucas reached the door of Emily's room and pushed it open. What he saw made the world stop. Bathed in the golden spill of late afternoon light, his daughter, his Emily, was standing. Not sitting in her wheelchair, not being carried, standing. She wobbled slightly, her tiny hands gripping the arms of Semyon behind her. Sophie, the maid. No, she was more than that now. She had been caring for Emily for 6 months. Quiet, steady, golden age Sophie. But nothing in her resume had prepared Lucas for this moment. Sufficienti supported Emily's waist gently, guiding her with a lightness that seemed more instinct than effort. And Emily, oh God, Emily was smiling, eyes closed, arms lifted in a soft arc, mimicking Abelard in his pose. The music flowed around them. Emily shifted her weight, lifted one foot just slightly off the ground and turned her head in time with the rhythm. It was clumsy, unbalanced, but it was dance. It was hope made real. Lucas stepped fully into the room, stunned, breath caught, and then it happened. Emily's foot faltered, her knee gave out. Safitri to catch her, but gravity moved faster. Emily tumbled to the floor with a soft cry, her thin body crumpling. Bees eyed the small stereo. Lucas surged forward. Emily? He shouted, scooping her in too? His arms. I'm okay, Daddy, she whispered quickly. But her voice trembled. He turned to Sophie, fury rising. What were you thinking, Hesnapped? Sophie stood, hands trembling slightly but her face calm. She wanted to try. She was paralyzed. Lucas barked. She could have broken something. She could have. He stopped at himself, cradling Emily tighter. I would never let her fall, Sophie said softly. But you did, he growled. Sophie lowered her gaze. I am sorry. Lucas said nothing more. He carried Emily out of the room without another word. That night, the mansion was unusually quiet. Dinner wasn't touched. The television stayed off. In her room, Emily sat curled in her wheelchair, the edges of her favorite blanket clutched tight in her hands. Her gaze was unfocused, her shoulders slumped. Sophie knocked gently on the doorframe. Can I come in? Emily gave a small shrug. Sophie entered and knelt beside her. How are you feeling? Emily stirred at her lap. Then, in a voice barely louder than breath, she said, I thought I could do it. I really thought. Sophie reached for her hand. You did do it, Emily. You stood, you danced. It was only a few seconds. Those chances were yours, and they were beautiful. Emily's eyes filled, but she blinked fast to keep the tears from falling. Daddy was mad. Lept was scared. Sophie said gently. No. Emily shook her head. He doesn't want me to stand. He does not believe I can. Sophie felt her throat tighten. That is not true, Emily whispered. Maybe he likes me better broken. Emily. Sophie tried to reach her, but the girl rolled slightly away. I am tired, she mumbled. I want to sleep. Sophie stayed a moment longer, but Emily did not sigh another word. Eventually, Sophie rose and walked to the door. Before she left, She looked back once at the girl who had laughed like a miracle just hours ago and now sat like a wilted flower. Alibi. The next morning, Lee refused to get out off bed. When Sophie brought her breakfast tray, the girl turned her face to the window. Silent pancakes. Sophie said gently, placing the tray on the small table by the bed. Your favorite with blueberries shaped like stars. Amelie gave no reaction. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the blanket. Well, do you like me to turn on the fairy lights or your music? Emily's voice when it came was flat. No. She did not want pancakes. She did not want music. She did not want to move. By the third day, she refused her therapy session. The in-home therapist left quietly, eyes full of concern. Lucas stood by the front window, watching the car pull away. His jaw waist-tight, his hands clenched. He had not spoken to Sophie since the incident. He had not raised his voice again, but the space between them now felt like an entire ocean. He had tried to sit with Emily that morning, had tried to read her a story. She had asked him, polite go. Now he stared out at the rain-streaked driveway, wondering how things had gone so wrong. He had only wanted to protect her. Sophie, meanwhile, never stopped showing up. She folded laundry, prepared meals, and tidied rooms in silence. But each afternoon, she slipped into Emily's room with a gentle smile and a new plan. One afternoon, she brought a roll of lavender ribbon. Emily turned her head. What's that for? Soft Ismold. It's for a dance. I said, I'm not dancing anymore. You said you're not standing, but dancing. Dancing can be done sitting too. Emily frowned. That's not real dancing. Hey. Sophie sat down cross-legged on the floor beside her. Would you like to hear a story? Emily hesitated, then nodded faintly. There was a little girl I met in the hospital, Sophie began. Her name was Maisie. She had a spinal condition that made it impossible for her to walk, even with help. Emily listened, arms folded. But Maisie loved ballet. She watched videos every day. Her favorite was the Swan Princess. Sophie smiled. I cannot twirl on my feet. I will twirl in my dreams. Emily's eyes softened. So, we created a dance together, Sophie said. Not with legs, but with hands. With arms, with breath. It was beautiful. That's silly, Emily whispered. It was powerful, Sophie said, and it made her feel free. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, what happened to her? Sophie's smile dimmed a little. She passed away, but not before she performed for her class. She wore a crown of paper roses and waved her arms like wings. They gave her a standing ovation. Emily looked down at her own hands. Sophie leaned forward. Dancing is not something you do with legs, Emily. It is something you feel in your chest. Tell the world you are still here, still shining. Emmy turned toward her slowly. What would I need? Sophie's voice brightened. Just 2 and maybe some ribbon. Later that afternoon, the music played softly from the stereo again. Emily sat upright in her wheelchair, a lavender ribbon in each hand as Sophie demonstrated a slow, sweeping movement of the arms. Imagino are painting the air, Sophie whispered. Imagine your breath is the music. Emily moved her arms shilly at first. Then with a bit more confidence, Sophie clapped softly. That is it. Just like that, they danced, not with feet, but with hope. Outside the room, Lucas stood at the top of the stairs, listening. Could not hear every word, but he heard laughter, a softer kind this time, hesitant, but real. His hand rested on the railing. He did not go in, but he did not walk away either. Lucas West had been watching his daughter more closely. Emily was different. Not in a way he could easily define, but in the way she laughed more, the way she held herself even. From her wheelchair, there was a quiet brightness in her eyes again, a light he thought he had lost forever. He also noticed that Sophie was always nearby when that light shone the brightest. And yet Lucas hesitated. He had spent his life managing risk, calculating outcomes. Losing his wife had destroyed his sense of safety. He was not ready to risk what remained of his world on someone he barely knew. One night, after tucking Emily into bed, Lucas called his assistant. Do a background check on Sophie. Everything you can find. The report arrived quickly. Sophie Bennett, age 29, graduate from one of the top medical programs, formerly a licensed physical rehabilitation nurse. Previously worked at Harmony Pines Children's Rehab Center. Not just on staff, she had led the pediatric therapy unit. Fired. The reason, whistleblowing. The details were vague, some redacted, but a name appeared multiple times. A young patient with cerebral palsy whom Sophie had shielded from alleged abuse. Sophie had filed formal complaints against the Sense director, then vanished from the profession. No malpractice, no lawsuit, just silence. Lucas stared at the glowing screen. He'd expected a struggling woman with no credentials. Instead, he found someone who had risked everything for a child. Still unsure, he began watching her more closely. He saw how she paused when Emily told wild stories about magical cloud kingdoms, then added her own flourishes to the tale. How she warmed Emily's hands with a cloth before therapy, and always said, "Let's do this together." Subtle things, but constant. One rainy evening, Lucas was driving home from a late dinner meeting. Passing the train station, he remembered Apromise too. Drop off donations at a local shelter. He turned into a misty alley, heading for the back entrance. Then he heard shouting, angry, panicked, allowed the noise, and stopped cold. Sophie was kneeling on the wet pavement, arms around a small boy no older than 8. A furious man stood over them, yelling, "Thief! He stole bread, little brat." The boy sobbed into Sophie's shoulder. The man raised a hand. Before Lucas could react, Sophie shifted, covering the child completely. "He's just hungry," she cried. "Do not thwart him." The man's hand came down, striking her shoulder hard. Lucas lunged. "Get away from her." The man backed off, cursed, and disappeared down the alley. Sophie stayed on the ground, arms still around the trembling boy. Lucas knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "It does not matter. It's you," Lucas said, stunned. "And was scared," she replied, gesturing to the boy. "Not evil, just scared." She tornadoed the boy. "You okay, sweetheart?" The child nodded, still shaking. Lucas brought them both home. He gave the boy clean clothes and a blanket, then called a trusted social worker. The child would be safe. Later, Sophie stood at the sink, rinsing a scrape on her arm. Lucas stood silently behind her. Then he did something unexpected. He cooked. Not a preheated tray, not a takeout order. Soup. Real soup. Placed the steaming bowl in front of her, then sat down across the counter. Sophie blinked in surprise. Lucas cleared his throat. "No one does what you did unless they have a very big heart." His voice was stiff, awkward, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer cold. For the first time, Sophie saw the man behind the title, and he saw the woman who never stopped choosing kindness. The sun was sinking low, casting golden ribbons of light across hardwood floors of the West family's makeshift practice room. Once a quiet guest room, now transformed into a space-off movement and possibility. Inside, Emily moved with surprising grace. Her hands lifted like wings, her wheelchair gliding in a slow arc across the room. Sophie guided her from behind, one hand on the chair, the other gently marking the rhythm. Their bodies moved together in harmony, not just in timing, but in emotion. This was not just dance, it was expression, release, a silent declaration that Emily was not broken. The piece Sophie had choreographed was scold the light within. There were no putzes, no grand jets. Instead, it was all in the hands, the tilt of the head, the flicker of feeling behind the eyes. And in those moments, Emmy ligaloed. Softly as she spun, her arms flowing like ribbons, her facet tilted toward the ceiling, Sophie whispered, "That is it. Feel the music. Let it carry you." Then quietly, the door creaked open. Lucas stepped in, holding a folder of documents he meant to drop off for Sophie, but the sight before him stopped him cold. Emily, bathed in honey gold light, was spinning. Not just her chair, but her soul. Her hands moved like brushstrokes in the air. Her laughter, soft and bright, filled the space like music. And beside her, Sophie, blonde hair catching the last of the sunlight. looked like she belonged in a dream, calm, patient, radiant. Lucas stood still in the doorway, invisible to them, completely forgent in their world of rhythm and joy. Then Emily spotted him. Her face lit up even more. "Dance with me," she called, waving him over. "Dance with me." Lucas blinked. "Me." Emily clapped her hands. "Yes, come on." He hesitated. "Dance him." Lucas West, CEO, master of press releases and mergers. "But dance. You do not think," he started. "Please?" Emily's voice was gentle, but so full of hope, it cracked something open in his chest. Sophie looked over, her expression unreadable but kind. He exhaled slowly. Then, without another word, he slipped off his shoes, loosened his tie, and stepped barefoot onto the warm wooden floor. Emily squealed with joy. Yay. Lucas moved awkwardly at first, hands unsure of where to go. He tried to mimic Sophie's earlier motions, raising his arms, stepping side to side, but he looked stiff, like someone doing yoga for the first time in a boardroom. Sophie covered her mouth to stifle a laugh. Emily giggled uncontrollably. "Daddy dances like a chicken." Lucas burst out laughing, truly laughing for the first time in what felt like years. "So what if I do?" he said, flapping his arms dramatically and earning another round of giggles. He danced badly, clumsily, but he danced. Sophie joined them, stepping in close and turning Emily's chair gently again to the music. Lucas followed, trying to match their rhythm, but always a beat behind, and somehow that made it perfect. There were no cameras, no corporate speeches, no investors to impress. Just a girl in a wheelchair, a woman with a healing heart, and a father who had finally remembered how to be a dad. The music swelled. Emily reached for both of them, Sophie with one hand, Lucas with the other. They formed a little circle. Sophie and Lucas exchanged a look, then followed Emily's lead as she whispered, "Spin with me." And so they did, slowly laughing, turning in a slow circle as the late sun bathed them in golden light. The world outside could have crumbled in that moment, and none of them would have noticed. It was not perfect choreography, but it was perfect in every way that mattered. As the music faded, Emily pulled them both into a hug, her arms wrapped around Sophie's waist, her head pressed against her father's chest. "I love this dance," she whispered. Lucas's eyes prickled. "I do too," he said, his voice rough. Sophie simply smiled and rested her cheek against Emily's soft hair. Three souls moving together, not in steps, but in sync. And for the first time in a long time, the house was not silent. It was full of life, full of laughter and love. The auditorium buzzed with the quiet anticipation only a school showcase could bring. Parents shuffled programs, younger siblings wriggled in seats, and teachers reminded the front row to silence their phones. Backstage, Emily sat in her wheelchair, dressed in a soft cream dress with satin ribbons that shimmered under the low stage lights. Her hands rested on her lap, trembling slightly. Sophie knelt beside her, adjusting the bow at the back of the chair. "You look like a star," she whispered. "I feel like I might throw up," Emily whispered back. Sophie smiled. "That's how you know it matters." Beyond the curtain, Lucas sat to fly. In the third row in a chair that felt far too small for him, he had never been the parent who attended every recital or volunteered for field trips. He had built empires, signed million-dollar deals. But right now, he was just a father trying not to shake. The principal stepped up to the microphone, her voice warm. "Our final performance tonight is from someone who reminds us all what courage truly looks like." Lucas straightened in his seat. "Please welcome Emily West." The curtain opened. It was a beat of silence. Then came the music. Soft, ethereal, familiar. Lucas froze. It was the Sama music Sophie had used during the evening practices, the piece called "The Light Within."
Ow.
Emily rolled onto the stage lowly, hands guiding her wheelchair in a gentle arc. Her arms rose, her head tilted back, and the dance began. Movements were simple, refined, but her eyes told a story. Every turn of the wheel, Every motion of her hands spoke of struggle, of beauty, of strength rediscovered. At one point, the lights dimmed slightly, casting a soft glow across her as she lifted both arms to the sky. Her body curved forward in a deep bow, and her chair spun in place, graceful, fluid, like she was floating. The crowd was silent. Not a cough, not a whisper, even the restless toddlers had gone still. Lucas felt something rise in his chest, tight, unfamiliar. Pride, wonder, gratitude. His hand gripped the edge of the program so hard it crumpled. Then, as the final note played, Emily came to a stop, center stage. She bowed her head, arms still open wide, and just before the curtain began to fall, Haris scanned the crowd, searching. They landed on him. Lucas, Dodo, weren't you specially watchful over them? Mr. Lennon, they should have been easy prey. Lucas, who had trust for trust moments, criticized them to the pax. Some who had hate, they should have been easy prey. Her father, her anchor, their gaze locked. She smiled, and Lucas stood. Was the first. A single figure rising from the seats, hands coming together in applause. Clap, clap, clash. The sound code in the still room. Then another person stood. Then another, and another until the whole auditorium rose as one. A standing ovation. Lucas clapped until his palm stung. Sophie from the side stage wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Backstage, Emily rolled off behind the curtain and was immediately engulfed by teachers and classmates cheering her on. But she looked past them toward the wings where Sophie waited. Did I do it? Emily asked, eyes-wide with hope. You did more than that, Sophie said, kneeling to hug her. You made them feel something. A few minutes later, Lucas made his way backstage, still trying to steady his breath. He spotted Emily first, surrounded by students. Then he saw Sophie, tired but glowing. He walked up, rested his hand gently on Emily's shoulder, and said, You are the bravest person in that room tonight. Emily beamed. Daddy, they clapped for me. All of them. They clapped because you reminded them of what it means to fight for joy. Then quieter, he turned to Sophie and thank you for reminding her and me. Sophie smiled, lips trembling slightly. You did that part yourself? They stewed in the chaos of celebration, but in their corner there was only calm, deep souls, settling calm. And for the first time, Lucas West realized his daughter had not just danced. She had taught the world how to see beauty in a new way, and he had never been more proud. The stars were beginning to peek through the dusky sky. As Lucas stepped into Thebachard, a small bouquet of lavender clutched awkwardly in one hand. The air was cool, still carrying the faint hume of applause from the evening's performance. He saw her sitting alone on the wooden bench beneath the garden lights. Sophie, quiet and reflective, her hands folded in her lap, her face tilted slightly to the breeze. Lucas cleared his throat. She looked up, surprised to see him there, even more surprised by the flowers. Hester did, holding the bouquet out stiffly. I'm really not good at this. Sophie blinked, then slowly accepted the lavender, brushing her fingers against his. They're beautiful, she said softly. Lucas exhaled, still standing. I just wanted to say thank you for what? Shisked, though the answer shimmered unspoken between them. He gestured vaguely toward the house. For bringing her back, Emily. You brought her back to me. Sophie's eyes softened, and she made space beside her on the bench. She was always there, Lucas. She just needed Simeon to believe in her again. He hesitated, then sat down. There was a pause, gentle, not awkward, just the sound of leaves rustling and the soft creak of the bench. Lucas looked up at the stars. After my wife died, I shut down. I told myself it was for Emily, that staying busy was the way to serve, I think. I just stopped knowing how to be human. Sophie didn't interrupt. She listened. Lucas continued, slower now. I used to count my success by contracts closed, deals made, but none of it taught me how to help my own daughter smile again. His voice dropped lower. I watched her fade, and I did nothing. And then you came in and started doing all the things I should have done. You laughed with her. You danced with her. You showed her she mattered. Sophie looked down at her lap. She showed me too, she said. that I still have something worth giving. Lucas turned to her, his expression open in a way it rarely was. You know, Hess said, voice catching. I had you vetted a while back. She blinked, startled. I figured, I thought. I do not know what I thought. That you were too good to be true, or that caring that much had to come with some angle. That's about what I found out. What? You did for those kids. He shook his head, almost ashamed. You could have walked away, but you didn't. Sophie's shoulders tensed. Estelle, think about her. The little girl I helped escape. I do not even know where Esh ended up. I just knew I could not stay silent. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. I think that is what makes you incredible, he finally said. You show up even when it is hard, even when no one sees it. Sophie met his gaze, something trembling in her chest. And then, in the silence, Lucas reached over almost uncertainly and laid his hand gently over hers. No pressure, no expectation, just warmth. Sophie didn't move away. She let the moment hold. It was not romantic. Not yet. It was something. A bridge, a first spark, inth dark. Their hands rested together under the soft garden lights. Neither of them speaking, but everything being said in that quiet touch. And in that touch, they both felt it. Not a promise, not a future, but the possibility of healing, of being seen, of love, slowly, quietly beginning to grow. It started with a video. Someone from the school had accorded Emily's performance. Her graceful turns in the wheelchair, her outstretched arms, the pure joy radiating from her small face. Beside her, visible for only a few seconds, was Sophie guiding, encouraging, glowing. The video went viral. People praised Emily. Others praised Lucas for allowing such a bold, inclusive performance. But it wasn't long before whispers turned sharp. An article appeared on a gossip blog, then another Millionaire's Maid or gold digger. Guru, it was cruel, and it spread fast. Photos of Sophie leaving Lucasum, holding Emily's hand at the playground, sitting beside Lucas at the performance. Twisted captions, nasty speculation. Then came the cruelest blow. An anonymous comment on a popular local forum. She used to work. With kids in rehab, she got fired probably for arson. Now she's playing house with a rich man and his daughter. Wake up, people. The next morning, Sophie sat silently at the kitchen table. The newspaper folded neatly beside her. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her tea. Lucas stepped into the room and immediately sensed the weight. She looked up. You saw it? He nodded once. Sophie straightened her shoulders. I don't want Emily to be dragged into this. Lucas crossed the room in 3 long strides. You are not the one who should feel as hemmed, he said firmly. But I do, she whispered. I never wanted any attention, just to help her, to help you. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. She was fading before you came, he said, his voice soft but fierce, when you brought her back. None of these people left know what that took. She gave a small smile, but it was hollow. Words on Theinsternet stick, Lucas. People believe what they want. Later that day, as Emila played in the garden with her nurse, Lucas stepped into his office and made a quiet call to a contact he hadn't spoken to in years. The next week, a young boy arrived quietly at a private children's clinic uptown. His name was Noah. His mother couldn't afford treatment, and he had been on a waiting list for over a year. Sophie had worked with him once back when she still wore scrubs and hope. She never found out how the bill disappeared. Lucas never told her, but he showed up, sat beside Noah's mother in the waiting room, and handed her a folded piece of paper. Inside, paid in full. No name, no signature, just the words for a heart that never gave up. That same night, another headline made waves. CEO defends caregiver amid viral storm. She didn't perform. She saved my daughter. Lucas had released a public statement, not through a PR agency, but written by hand, scanned, and posted online. It read, "The woman in question is not a gold digger. She is not an opportunist. She is a healer. My daughter was slipping away from joy, from hope, and this woman gave both back to her. I will not stand silent while the world tries to shame someone. For For their kindness, the statement went viral too. But this time the world listened. People apologized. Some deleted their posts. Others sent messages of support. But Sophie, she said nothing. She just returned to the piano room that evening, wheeled Emily into position, and softly pressed play on the speaker. She danced again. And this time, Lucas stood by the door, not watching silently, but clapping in rhythm together in stronger scene. 1 year later, the sound of cautious, careful steps echoed down the hallway off the Carter Rehabilitation Center. Emily, now 10, gripped her walking frame with determination. Her legs, still shaky, moved one at a time. Her brows furrowed in concentration. At the end of the hall, Sophie and Lucas stood with arms open wide. "You've got this, sweetheart," Lucas said, his voice softer than the man he used to be. Emily took one more step, then another. Then she let go of the frame just for a second and fell forward into their arms. She laughed. Lucas laughed. Sophie cried. It was more than a milestone. It was a miracle born from love, patience, and belief. The Carter Rehabilitation Center had opened just 6 months earlier. Lucas had stepped away from the corporate world and poured his resources into creating a facility unlike any other. A place where healing was not just medical but emotional. A place built on second chances. Sophie had agreed reluctantly, humbly, to become its director. They called it the second step. It offered therapy, dance, music, and art. But most of all, it offered hope. The walls were painted by their children themselves, murals of sunflowers, stars, and swirling ballerinas. The motto over the entrance read, "We all stumble. What matters is the next step." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, families gathered for the Ascent's first annual celebration. Lucas sat in the front row, his arm around Emily. Sophie stepped onto the small stage in a simple white dress, barefoot, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. The crowd quieted. Then, from the side of the stage, Emily wheeled herself into view. She wore a lavender tutu and matching satin ribbons in her hair. Her wheelchair had been decorated with white lights and silver feathers, her own creation. The music began. Soft piano, gentle strings. They danced, Sophie guided, Emily twirled. Their movements were slow but radiant, full of grace, full of truth. Halfway through, Emily reached for Sophie's hand, then turned to the audience. "Daddy," she called, "come dance with us." "At!" The crowd chuckled. Lucas blinked, but then he stood and walked barefoot on the stage. He took Emily's free hand and Sophie's in the other. Together, under the fairy lights, they moved, not perfectly, not with choreography, but with heart. At the end, the three of them bowed. The applause was thunderous, but louder than the clapping was the sound of something healing for everyone watching and for the three standing on Thought Stage. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, Sophie found a letter folded on her desk. It was from Emily, written in purple crayon. The words slightly crooked. "Dear Mommy in heaven, guess what? I can walk a little. I can dance a lot. Daddy laughs now. He hugs me all the time. He's not quiet anymore. He is living and I am dancing. Emily." Sophie pressed the letter to her heart. Lucas stepped into the door resilient. They did not need to say anything. Some families are born, others are built. It's when it was danced into existence. If this story moved your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here we tell tales of healing, of love rebuilt, of second chances that change everything. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the quiet ones. And sometimes families are not found. They're made with every step, every dance, and every act of courage. Subscribe now and join us, FO.